He was part of our, we have a master plan advisory group, and Bill was part of that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Yeah, maybe
Welcome
it's
to the
Wednesday.
February 19th
Recording in progress.
Planning Board meeting. We have a couple of members who will not be joining us, and Vice Chair Mr. Coviel will be late. So, Logan, will you sit for Bill?
Yes.
And Frank, will you sit for Joe?
Yeah.
Thank you. We have the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of January 22nd. Anybody have any comments on those?
I'd say move to approve.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have two determinations of completeness, one a subdivision review for request of Nicole and William Douglas as owners of property on 409 Lafayette Road, requesting preliminary and final subdivision approval to subdivide the existing residential lot into two residential lots with associated site improvements. This property is on Assessor's Map 230, Lot 22, and is in the SRB district.
Motion to determine it is complete.
Need a second? Second. Was that a second?
Right.
All those
Ryan,
in favor?
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The site plan review completeness, request of Colbia Enterprises LLC as owner for property at 1980 Woodbury Avenue, requesting site plan review approval for the redevelopment of the site to include a 5,500 square foot convenience store with 6 fueling stations and associated site improvements. That property is on Assessor's Map 239, Lot 11, and is in the Gateway Corridor G1 district.
Move to say the site plan is complete.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm going to move on to public hearings. For those in the audience, our rules for public hearings are presentation by the proponent, questions by the planning board members, then the public comment, excuse me, is limited to people speaking for or against the application. Speaking to the application is just speaking about it. You don't have to take a position, but it has to be about the application. Anyone providing public comment, you have to provide your name and address. Speak through me. There'll be up to 3 rounds of discussion. First round is 3 minutes, oral comment only. Second round is up to 5 minutes. You can make a presentation during that if you need one. And the third round, if needed, is 5 minutes with no presentations. After that, we close the public hearing and the board deliberates. First public hearing is an old business matter. Request of Mariah Koncepolskaya and Ralph Minderhoud as owners for property at 65 Onyx Lane, requesting a wetland conditional use permit from section 10-10-17-50 to install 12 push piers to stabilize the existing foundation in the 100-foot wetland buffer area. This property is on Assessor's Map 220, Lot 35, and lies in the Single Residence B or SRB district. Who is here to present this application?
Hey there. My name is Beth Murch, and I am with Groundworks, the company that will be performing the work. So, essentially, the client reached out to the company based off their independent engineer that they had out. They had a home that they lived in previously in Texas that had some settlement, so they were familiar with the symptoms of that. They had some cracks in drywall, whatnot upstairs. Their independent engineer determined that they had approximately a 2-inch drop on one side of the home. There's 2 cracks in the foundation indicating what side had dropped. So I went out and did an inspection, confirmed what their engineer saw, and the repair that we would be doing is push piers. We also sent our project to our engineering, and I believe that's the paperwork that you guys have. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant? Representative, yes, Beth.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I think this sounds like something really cool. So it's like you put a pier down in the ground next to the building, but then something goes up under the building. And do you actually raise it up or just support it?
So you can, in their scenario, it's an established home, so we're not going to try to lift it. We're solely trying to stabilize it so it doesn't continue to settle. So you're pretty close, but the bracket goes under the footing.
Under the foot.
Correct. Yep. And then piers are driven into the soil. They're 4-inch round. I'm sorry, 2-inch round. They're drilled into this or cored into the soil until it hits bedrock. It's hard to tell you where that is, but typically in our area, it's approximately 14 feet.
Great. Thank you. And that was purely out of curiosity.
That's okay. Get to be curious.
Just trying to learn something new.
I'm glad I could teach you.
Any other questions? No other questions? Thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom to speak to, for, or against this application? That includes you if you have anything else to say, but
I don't think
you
so.
don't have to.
Okay, thanks.
Last call, if nobody is available on Zoom or here to speak to, for, or against this application. I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'd make a motion that we vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'd also make a motion we vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following stipulation condition 2.1 that's in the staff memo.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes.
I'd just like to say that I am glad that there is ways to fix these sorts of things, and I actually went out and looked at the property, and if you look even on Map Geo and get a sideways view, that whole side of the house does look like it's sinking. So I think this is a really good project, and very excited there's a way to fix these things.
Cool. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have a request of Colby Enterprises LLC as owner for property at 1980 Woodbury Avenue, requesting site plan review approval for the redevelopment of the site to include 5,500 square foot convenience store with 6 fueling stations and associated site improvements. This property, again, is on Assessor's Map 239, Lot 11, and is in the Gateway Corridor G1 District. Who is here to present this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Chris Rice with TF Moran. I'm here on behalf of the owner and applicant, Colby Enterprises. We were last before you at the January planning board hearings, and I know you've got other items on the agenda, so I'm happy to give as much or as little of a presentation as you'd like. At that hearing, we had presented the project. It's basically a tear down and rebuild of an existing gas station site. We've been before the TAC committee multiple times. We've addressed all their comments, all of the comments we received from the last planning board meeting, which was just a right-hand turn sign coming onto Gosling Road. So I can go into more detail if you'd like, or just open it up to questions if that's the pleasure of the board.
Any changes from last month?
Other than just adding the right-hand turn sign, and the bike rack location shifted a little bit from what you last saw, but we still are providing one.
Okay.
That was my request.
And I understand you got the variances last night.
Yes, they were first approved at the July 15th meeting last year. However, due to a noticing issue, we had to go back, so we went back before the ZBA last night and received all the, or reaffirmed all the relief we had previously requested. We have no waiver requests as part of this application for the planning board.
Okay. My last question, did you straighten out the frontage question on the, because you're on the two corners?
Yes, we did. We took care of that. Basically, what had occurred was we have frontages on two sides of the property. The existing conditions plan had incorrectly labeled the remaining two property lines as side setbacks. One of them is supposed to be a rear. In order to get everything to work, the owner has been working with city staff and 911 to change the site.
Oh.
To change the site address, which would make everything comply with the setback requirements.
Okay.
And that's already in process. It just takes a little while to work through the 911
Sure.
system, but that will have taken place by the time they are constructed.
Any other questions? I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to open the public hearing. Is there anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Guess you've done your homework. Last call. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Going to close the public hearing.
I move that we vote to find the site plan application meets the requirements set forth in the site plan regulations, section 2.9 evaluation criteria, and adopt the findings of facts as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Vote to grant the site plan approval with the following conditions as outlined in the staff memo, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. and 2.5 and 2.6.
Second?
Got them all?
Yeah.
I think we
I
got
will.
them all.
I have a
Yes.
application not specific to this proposal, but when you have a corner lot and you're doing a change of address, have we done that before? Has that occurred before where that changes those setbacks within a proposal that is existing?
Not that I can recall, but it's not,
It's not offensive.
it's not, like illegal or against the regulation.
No, I, I didn't want to
Right.
scrutinize it by any
Right.
means. More so just trying to understand, like, when you have that really unique scenario, if that is done in stride or done after the fact, or it holds up an application.
Sometimes it's done after the fact, like in the workflow of the permit.
Okay, yeah.
Especially with like ADUs, they'll get an address assigned after.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, more curiosity.
Yep.
Thanks.
I guess, you know, like if it happens again, right, like during a public hearing or a butters notice or something,
Yeah.
someone might, you know, object to that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Not the case here.
No, not really.
That's a good thing to discuss after there's not a motion pending for approval, and we have these people waiting patiently for their
Apologies for
vote.
the heartbreak there.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh, lordy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm new here.
Andrew, you can't say that anymore. It's been too many
Request
years.
of Nicole and William Douglas as owners for property at 409 Lafayette Road, requesting preliminary and final subdivision approval to subdivide the existing residential lot into 2 residential lots with associated site improvements. This property is on Assessor's Map 230, Lot 22, and lies in the Single Residence B, or SRB, district. Who is here to present this application?
Richard Hackerman from Altus Engineering. Eric is away tonight, probably may be signing in via Zoom.
He is
but-
on the Zoom. I see him.
Okay. Felt this was pretty straightforward. He asked me to come up and speak on it. It's a two-lot subdivision, taking in an existing lot, making it into 2. The applicants, Nikki and Bill Douglas, have been before the ZBA and received their variances, and they've been to the Technical Advisory Committee, taken their recommendations, and those are the plans that you have in front of you now. I can go over his list of each item if you would prefer, or you can, they're pretty straightforward.
Well, just a quick overview of the proposal, and probably be enough, and then if we have questions, we can ask them, but
Okay, sure. So the project in general brings, the address is 409 Lafayette Road, and there's a shared 50-foot right-of-way that comes in and services the 3 lots now. The proposal would bring, for the new lot in the back of 409, that lot would now be 22-1, and it would have an address of 411. That would receive an access easement across the existing driveway to 409. So you would come in the 50-foot right-of-way, take a left, and take an immediate sharp right. And it's, if you've been out there or driven by, it's pretty wide open. It doesn't seem like it should be any issue with the neighbors. Then the utilities would need to be underground, of course, and run from Lafayette Road. We worked out the details of those with the different utility companies and the city. And the last item that was needing to be addressed, they didn't want to bring the underground electric in from Lafayette, so we're in conversation with Eversource to ask if that can be, if the new service can come from a pole that would be on the, let's see here, northerly side of 411. And so I think that's I think they've received positive input that will be acceptable.
okay. Thank you. Questions of the applicant? Folks look like they're intently studying things, so.
pretty straightforward.
Anybody working on a question, or we good? Thank you very much. I don't want to cut Eric out. Did you want to add anything, Eric?
Eric, did you want to add anything?
You don't have to.
He might be driving.
He's shy.
Okay.
He's shot. Oh, no.
I'm gonna open the public hearing. Is there anybody
Eric's not shy.
here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? This could include Eric if he's...
I guess formally I should say that we are requesting that you approve the preliminary and the final subdivision and the site improvements that we've requested. Looking at the list from the staff recommendation, the applicant is in agreement to meet those conditions.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. I see nobody in the room. Is there anybody on Zoom?
Just Eric.
And he's not raising his hand. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we vote to find the subdivision application meets the requirements set forth in the subdivision rules and regulations and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I will continue and make a motion to vote to grant the preliminary and final subdivision approval with the following stipulations, 2.1 through 2.4 in the staff memo.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a request of HCA Health Services of New Hampshire as owner, DBA Ducharme McMillan and Associates. I just skipped one. The next one is a request of Welby Long Family Revocable Trust as owner, and Jeffrey Paul McMahon and Lisa Haggerty McMahon as owners for property at 245-255 Thornton Street, requesting approval of the lot line revision between map 162 lot 2 and map 162 lot 1 to settle a property line dispute. The revision will result in an increase of 454 square feet to lot 1 and a decrease of that amount from lot 2. These properties are on Assessor's Map 162 lot 1 and lot 2 and lie within the General Residence or GRA district. Who is here to present this application?
We're involved in that case. Our attorney is actually on her way. Could we come back to this? I am present if you want. We can cover it or we can wait on the agenda. My name is Amy Manzelli. I'm here from BCM Law. I represent Lisa Haggerty McMahon and Jeff McMahon. Darcy Pacer and I have been working together on this. The parties have come to an agreement on this. I would be happy at the board's pleasure to wait and move down the agenda. Darcy is en route right now. As this is a very simple lot line adjustment, we'd be happy at the board's pleasure to move forward as listed on the agenda or to postpone for later tonight, not to a continuance. I'll take lead from the chair.
Are these people your clients?
No, they are not. No, my clients are not here and their attorney is not here.
But we did all agree that our attorney would be representing us on this.
Yep.
What's the board's pleasure? It is pretty straightforward, but
It is straightforward, and we only have one other case, so they'd only be able to wait for one more application.
Yeah.
So-
However the board sees fit.
I mean, we can do like I made a mistake doing and go to the one after.
You almost did it. You almost-
Luckily, Darcy has just walked in there.
Perfect.
We stalled long enough.
Okay. She is. With no further ado.
Good filibuster.
Ms. Darcy Pacer, thank you.
We'll give you a chance to get settled.
I didn't know this was a speed agenda this evening.
We're
do our
going
best.
rather quickly tonight.
That's good, that's good. Well, hello, members of the board, good evening. I'm not sure how far Attorney Manzelli got in her beginning of her presentation, but not far. I'm Darcy Pizer. I'm here on behalf of the applicants this evening, Aaron Long and Tara Welby, who are the owners of 255 Thornton Street through their trust. Aaron and Tara are here tonight. Also here is Amy Manzelli, who is the attorney for the abutters, Jeffrey and Lisa McMahon, who are the owners of 245 Thornton. So, I catch my breath after running from the parking lot.
Do you need a minute?
Sorry?
Do you need a minute?
No, okay. So as the staff memo that was sent to the board notes, the approval of this lot line adjustment is the final step for the parties to finalize a settlement to the litigation between them, which commenced in 2024 as to a disputed boundary between the two properties. And just by way of background, 255 Thornton Street used to have a fence which ran along the portion of the boundary between the properties, about starting at the rear of the property and running about halfway up. And so the litigation which led to this application alleged that the parties believed the fence line to be the true boundary. And when Aaron and Tara had their property surveyed in 2023 by Knight Hill, they learned that the boundary line did not exactly follow the fence. That survey was submitted with the applicant's narrative materials as Exhibit A. The fence ran along a curve which, at its widest point, was approximately 3 feet from the surveyed boundary line. So after much back and forth and extremely detailed settlement negotiations, the parties have agreed to move the boundary line to what is shown on the lot line adjustment plan, which is before the board this evening. The revised line lies closer to the line of the old fence, which has since been removed. So as shown on the lot line adjustment plan, which was prepared by JVA Associates, the parties are seeking to relocate the lot line 3.01 feet to the west and further on to the Welby-Long property of 255 Thornton Street. So as you can see, there is the line runs straight from the rear of the property, and then there's a small jog to the east toward the front where the revised line intersects with a Norway maple tree, and then the line turns and runs to the existing boundary monument on Thornton Street. And the reason for this slight jog is because the parties, through their detailed negotiations, have agreed to shared ownership of the tree. And it also avoids any changes to the frontage of the two lots, which would require relief from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So as a result of the proposed lot line adjustment, 245 Thornton Street will gain 454 square feet of lot area. There will be no changes to the frontage of either lot. There's no construction or work proposed in the claimed area. There's no changes to any access, and accordingly, no other relief from any municipal board is required to allow the parties to affect the terms of their settlement agreement. The request for relief tonight, while minor in comparison to likely other matters before the board, is very important to the parties to allow them to put the litigation behind them and affect the terms of their settlement. So for those reasons, we ask the board to approve the proposed lot line adjustment plan of the parties.
Thank you. Questions? I have one. Why didn't you follow RSA 472?
I'm sorry?
Why didn't you do it as a boundary line agreement?
Because there was, this was a boundary by acquiescence claim and or an adverse possession claim, and the parties reached this agreement by settlement, and it was determined by the city that we couldn't affect the terms of the settlement agreement without coming before this board as a lot line adjustment.
Okay, just curious. Any other questions? I guess this is a public hearing as well, right? Thank you very much. I'm going to open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
No.
Seeing nobody, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Oh, I'll go ahead and do it again. I will make a motion to vote to find the subdivision application meets the requirements set forth in subdivision rules and regulations, adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll also make a motion we vote to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval with the following conditions in the staff memo 2.1 through 2.3.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You are approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have a request of HCA, right?
Yep, yep.
I'm getting, be sure. HCA Health Services, New Hampshire is owner, DBA Ducharme McMillan and Associates is applicant for property at 333 Borthwick Avenue, requesting a wetland conditional use permit from section 1010-1750 to widen the existing sidewalk and construct a new overhead canopy at the ambulance bay. Proposed impacts include approximately 730 square feet of new impervious surface within the 100-foot wetland buffer. This property is on Assessor's Map 240 Lot 2-1 and lies within the Office Research District and Highway Noise Overlay Districts. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening, Board. My name is Chris Akers with Catalyst Design Group. We're an engineering firm based out of Nashville, Tennessee, representing the hospital.
Good evening.
The proposed project is located on the southwest corner. You see the red is the a helipad. The white roof area just to the right of that is basically the area of the project. There's an existing ambulance garage where ambulances pull through. One of those garage bay doors is a little more narrow than the others. We want to replace that and make it wider, as well as there are two existing ambulance parking spaces that have a 5-foot wide sidewalk on the front of those. We want to widen that sidewalk to 12 feet and provide a canopy cover over top of those. Thus, the slight increase in impervious area, and to help offset that, we're proposing actually a little bit more larger landscape area than the proposed impervious area to help offset that. There's the landscape plan there. And that's located basically between the existing building and the proposed sidewalk expansion. So it's an attempt to, I guess, to improve the patient experience to and from the ambulance when it backs up to the inside the hospital. And we're on the very, very outer edge of the 100-foot wetland buffer, probably within the last 10 feet of it.
Okay. Is that it?
I think so.
Okay.
If there's any other questions.
Questions of the applicant? And Vice Chair, Mr. Coviello has joined us. Thank you.
Apologies.
No questions? Well, did you come here from Nashville?
Yes, sir.
Oh, my goodness.
I have projects here as well as in Manchester, so it kind of works out really well. And hopefully we'll miss the snow tomorrow afternoon. we'll see. It was 76 degrees in Nashville today, of all things.
Oh.
Well,
I
you
don't
didn't
like
have
to
to say that.
Nah.
Yeah, seriously, now we don't.
But it'll be high 40. It'll be back to 32 on Saturday. So.
Now we should just be mean to him, right?
Oh, there you go. I enjoy coming up here. It's a beautiful area.
So I know there were some issues about the cleaning up the drainage out back. Is that all being addressed with this?
We're hoping that's going to be a separate portion of that. Dave and Kate and I we walked that site earlier today on the snow, walking around trying to identify some solutions for the dredging of the swale and that sort of thing. But that is a little bit longer process than just a small little projects. We're hoping that can be continued after the approval of this project.
It came up in one of the earlier approvals and just seems like it ought to get addressed. So.
Yes, sir. And then the hospital is dedicated, or the HCA corporate who owns the hospital is dedicated to solving that.
Okay, so you're going to make sure that they follow through and take care of that?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Since we dragged Dave all the way here, shouldn't he give us an update?
Well, he was nodding his head.
Would Mr. DeFossis like to come give us an update?
Hi, good evening, members of the board. Dave DeFossis from Public Works. We have, at Public Works, been working diligently for the last 4 or 5 years since we became aware. Liberty Mutual came to us and they were complaining that their ponds were an additional 18 to 24 inches overfilled. So over the history of the hospital, with multiple expansions and the emergency room and a bunch of things that happened in the last 45 years, the original wetland that surrounded the hospital has been slowly getting filled in with sediment. So a lot of that is plowing sediment, some of it's construction sediment. So you'll see that in the Conservation Commission memo that they are asking that the applicant stops pushing snow in the wetland. So that'll certainly help the situation. And the applicant has been willing to help us. There'll be a rather sizable wetland permit that'll need to go through. That basically starts at Borthwick Avenue and will proceed almost all the way around the backside of the emergency room, all the way back to where those the yellow sticker memos are on that picture. So we've determined through GIS that to get the flow line of the swale back to original condition, somewhere around 18 inches of sediment needs to be removed from the swale. Now, that's not necessarily continuously everywhere, but there are little check dams of sediment all over the place that are blocking that flow. The reason why that's important is because Panaway Manor drains across the highway and drains into Liberty Mutual's pond. I-95 drains into Liberty Mutual's pond. And the Sherburne well fields drain into the marsh on the other side of Borthwick. They cross Borthwick and then drain through this swale too. So there's an enormous, probably in excess of 80 acres of very expensive property that drains through this little swale. So really the goal here is just to get that swale so that it drains. We lower the water levels back to where they're supposed to be. The well road that we have out to the Collins Well has flooded a couple of times. Not recently because we haven't had a lot of rain in the last couple of years, but when we get a lot of rain, the road will actually flood now because the swale needs to be maintained. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant, other than his journey? Going to open the public hearings. Anybody here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
Our ratings are plummeting.
Yeah. Last call. Anybody here on Zoom? Going to close the public hearing.
Make a motion? Allow me. Move to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of facts as presented.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions, 2.1 through 2.3, as outlined in the memo.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Safe travels.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation and your travel.
Good luck getting back.
We have a city council referral and a historic district commission design review of new structures. It's in the staff memo talking about that.
Do you want me to?
Council looking for a recommendation. You don't want
I will get started since
Okay.
I've already talked about this previously at City Council. This was brought forward by Councilor Blaylock. He was talking to some developers and had this in his mind, a great idea to remove new construction from the historic district to try to make it more affordable to do buildings in that district when it's got to be vacant land. So there's no additions or renovations or tear downs. It had to be, vacant land with new construction. We had a fair amount of discussion, if I remember correctly, it was a couple meetings ago, about this. In my way of trying to sort of find a way that maybe there's a happy medium, I brought up the idea of pre-approved plans or pre-approved materials, so that there might be a way to, if you pull from these plans or pull from these materials, maybe then, there doesn't need to be quite the oversight. So I brought that forward. The chairman of the historic district did come and speak before us as well, and is not against trying to find a happy medium to this. But we decided that really all the land use boards should have their input, and that's what we're asking tonight, is just for your thoughts around this concept and idea. There, does that get you going?
Andrew.
How many lots does this apply to?
Every parking lot sitting in the historic district. So there's still a fair amount of vacant parking lots in the historic district, so I don't know off the top of my head how many exactly.
Is it limited to just vacant lots?
Yes. That was, the idea was that it would be limited to just vacant lots, not anything with a structure currently sitting on it.
Even though somebody could, in theory, tear down one of those homes?
No, if there's a building sitting on it, to tear it down, you'd have to go to the HDC.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the memo just says new construction, but.
Correct. We talked really in detail about this, and the concept from the council that brought it forward was that he just wanted vacant lots. So for instance, the Brick Market was a parking lot, right? So that building would have been exempt if it went through whatever process we might discuss.
Yes, Andrew.
But to follow up on my own question, there have been a few instances in our history where we have seen buildings fall into disrepair and in subsequent fashion fall down. I can think of 3, and
Or burn down.
or burn, and thus be condemned. But what happens there?
It was my understanding from the request that that would not count because it had a building on it. And maybe the city manager remembers even better than I, but wasn't that, it had to be truly vacant land with no structure of any kind.
So some language that defines new construction as being not infill or replacing something or.
Correct. There would have to be some very crafty language from our very talented attorneys to get to that point.
New construction on undeveloped property.
Or undeveloped, that's a good word.
Logan, you had your.
Unimproved? Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of these same things. I'm just curious, like, if the land becomes vacant by removal, at some point it becomes vacant land, doesn't it? So just thinking long-term.
Well,
Previously developed.
right, it was
It wasn't-
previously developed, which meant in order for that building to come down in the historic district, I believe it has
If
to
you go
go.
back far enough, though, I'll bet some of those parking, semantics. My personal thought is I would be in favor of seeing this expanded to more than just vacant lots, but I know the vacant lots is maybe an easier thing to get through. I also just wanted to note, there's some really good input in the packet from the HDC. Specifically, the costs incurred for review process, and mentioned some items about fees, which kind of misses the point that I don't think historic district fees are the issue here in terms of impediments to development. It's probably the process and hiring of lawyers and delays to projects. So, which is hard to quantify, but just for the record, I don't think anyone's worried about the HDC raking in the big bucks. They're worried about the delays.
No, it boils down to the amount of cost of time of all those professionals, engineers, architects, whoever needs to present. That's really where the cost, I think, is endured, that we're talking about,
Yeah.
the developers are talking about. They're talking about the fact, some of these projects take, over a year of sessions going before an HDC, and that's just a lot of time spent constantly going before them for work sessions and whatnot. And that's where the real cost. It has nothing to do with the actual permitting fees with the HDC.
Is there any value? The other thing I was thinking here is, rather than just looking at vacant lots, like the current status, but the future status, so for certain types of projects, things would be exempt. For example, if you were to, I'm trying to think of a good use, but you were to say, hey, housing, as long as it's on a vacant lot, wouldn't need HGC approval, but if you were proposing some, I can't think of a crazy use that people might be less, museums, goodness knows, as we recently discussed, so something that was outside of that might warrant a little more HDC input. Maybe looking at the future use rather than the current use in terms of what would be exempt. Just a thought.
Tony, you had your hand up?
Well, yeah, a couple things. I mean, I think we all want to play the but what if, and so allow me to do it. So a structure exists in the HDC, you want to demolish it, that requires an HDC permit.
Mm-hmm.
They do that, it sits vacant for 10 years, but it doesn't matter. There was once a structure there. I think so. We have this historical, like when is 0 day? When do we? I mean, every piece of
Be
land.
an effective date of the ordinance would be the way you do it, usually like that.
Everything is structure standing as of the date the ordinance is passed.
Right.
Okay. And then in my head, I'm like, I get what they're trying to do here, and I'm very supportive of the concept, but I think the better way to approach this is like, we're trying to protect structures that are historic and abutting buildings. And like ideally, you go through and look at the building inventory and choose areas where you have really attractive buildings that you want to preserve, and you don't want the buildings next to detract from that. Then I'm like, oh yeah, that's what the HDC is. Like, that's what it's supposed to, that's the concept of it. So I think there's a bit of like good that could come of this, but I think they're attacking it the wrong way. And maybe we need to be more liberal or conservative, whatever way you want to say, of looking at the homes we're trying to preserve and the structures next to it, so we could realistically, is what I'm saying, is shrink the HDC. You know, maybe not have it be so, unbroken blob. Maybe we just need more pieces. I think that would be a better way to go, because I think there's vacant land that we're like, yeah, that's fine, build whatever you want there. But there's probably vacant land next to a very important structure that we're like, no, that's not an area we want. Conversely, there's houses or property structures on property that we're like, you're really not going to distract from anything if you tear that down and rebuild. But I think the intention of trying to make things easier is a good one. Don't think the language as written is where we should go.
I absolutely would not support an exemption. I think Beth's idea of having some examples, and I've worked with other historic districts where there's more concrete examples in a manual that give people better guidance. A lot from what I've seen, and I work with land use boards all over the place, all over the country, and you can create your own problems by not working with a land use board. And I've seen that happen with some applications in Portsmouth. That said, if there were a guideline, a guidebook, if the HDC manual, which they have one now, but it's perhaps not as explicit in certain situations as it could be, which would pick up a little bit on what Tony was saying, I think. That could streamline things, make things easier for people to understand, but the history, our historic district is one of the things that makes Portsmouth special. And it's one of the reasons why people who come here and enjoy it and don't even realize why they're enjoying it, why they enjoy it. It's the history, and that is what has made a lot of Portsmouth walkable, because it was designed at a time when that's what people did, they walked. So I'd be very, very cautious, and I'm highly skeptical of an exemption without putting some brains around it.
Could I just add to that for one quick second? The chairwoman did bring up at our meeting that they actually have received a grant, and that they are going to be redeveloping their guidelines. So maybe the report back could be that we encourage them to head those guidelines in a certain way, which the pre-approved materials might shorten and streamline. So I think it would be nice to get some of those sort of direct recommendations back that we can report.
Yeah, whether it's pre-approved or examples. Sometimes it's difficult to do pre-approval with historic properties, but you
Right.
can have examples. Here's an example of an infill, and it wouldn't have to look like this, but the form and
Or at
how
least
it
the
occupies-
aspects.
Right. Yes, Andrew.
I just don't see a world in which this has much traction, given the such small minority of properties it applies to and where those sit. So less the quantity, more the quality of where those properties are, and the residual impact it could have on the neighboring historic properties. And sure, even though they're previously undeveloped, I don't think it makes too much logical sense to have that juxtaposed next to some of the most historic properties that we have. To use one example, we are looking at the M&T Bank parking lot across from the church. And in my head, if you have a non-historic regulated building with no design review whatsoever, that to me seems pretty offensive to what that church is and the history it carries. And that's probably the largest lot that this would apply to.
There's also one down the hill from you on the other side of the street.
Yep.
I've been, as you've been talking, I've been going around, and I've found 3 parking lots in downtown, 2 of which you just mentioned.
The
That's
other,
about it.
the other being the TD Bank parking lot, which also happens to sit right next to the church.
Yeah.
So unless somebody like demonstrates how this enables a developer to save hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't really see myself getting behind that. There are just so many other priorities that we could be addressing, and this one just seems very minute.
What I'm hearing is you guys like the idea of streamlining it in some way, shape, or form, but not outright exemption. Is that what I hear?
Until we have design review on this board, I don't think that we should be eliminating any opportunity to control a design process.
Okay. I'm just making sure I read my brain right. For the record, I'm not telling you which side I sit on. I'm just trying to gather information, so.
Well, I think that's a reasonable, where I sit on it. Now, I don't know, Logan, you have a different perspective, so.
No, I really did like the idea that was already brought up of if there are specific lots, maybe that are not next to a historic building or whatever, that we could say, well, this one could be exempt, just remove it from the historic district, and then there's no need to rewrite, add yet another layer of rulemaking on top. If it's not in the historic district, then all the regular rules still apply. So if we could identify specific lots and say these two, these three, maybe just this one doesn't need to be in the historic district, then that's fine. But then we could also analyze and say, well, this is a parking lot, but maybe it's more just a review of what's in the historic district so that it's not overreaching accidentally.
I'd just like to also follow up with the idea of, we've had a lot of feedback on the historic district just trying to change the boundaries. That was so difficult, we sent it to the master planning process. So there was pushback on both sides. People are like, why are you taking me out? I mean, my house should be in it, right? I was shocked at the
Someone
people
wants
that
to go
actually
in, then yeah,
want
sure.
to stay in the historic district. So when you're talking about lots that are like in the middle of the downtown, it doesn't make sense to take that one lot in the middle of the downtown and call that not historic, right? So I guess I'm just, if it was a parking lot on the very edge of the historic district, I'd say you might get buy-in, but I just, based off of the feedback we got, just trying to slightly change the boundaries. And this was brought forward by the HDC, and nobody was going to buy on for it, so.
Picking up on that, I have had a conversation with the chair of the HDC, and we have talked about the idea of having a joint meeting, which I think is a good idea, as we're talking about the same things Beth just talking about with the master plan and HDC boundaries. I mean, in some states out west, 50 years constitutes historic.
I'm historic.
I'm really historic. And, when the historic districts were first imposed, there was more than one, but even since it's been changed, time passes. And we've got buildings that aren't getting any younger, so it's worth looking at and just seeing, should we expand it, shrink it, what should we do? But I think we should look at it and talk about it, so. Yes.
I mean, there's also the idea of different types of historic districts. I mean, the look downtown might be one thing, but you might have a historic district that's, from the 1950s. Like if you looked over at kind of the Presidents and over by Dondero, that school, a lot of that, some communities have looked at those and created historic districts around those because, they were communities that came up in the 1940s and 50s. And so I think understanding what we're trying to preserve, like what history are we trying to preserve, impacts what we want built where. So if we're trying to preserve downtown Portsmouth as, this brick downtown, well, that's, after 3 fires, so we're not necessarily, it's not the 1700s. So I think just understanding what the historic district, what history is it trying to preserve? What part of Portsmouth's history is it trying to preserve?
It's an unfortunate title of that organization. It's really not the Historic District Commission. It's really a Design Review Commission. So they are, for historic homes, they're definitely trying to preserve them. But for new homes next to historic homes, they may treat it like Trinity Church and the Hancock Tower. Like, right, they don't want the building to look historic because it's going to detract from the building next to it. So I think the board in general, they're pretty well trained and understand that art of how to preserve historic. So I don't think the board is trying to preserve every property and have it look a certain way. I think they're respecting the properties that do look that way and look at the abutting properties and say, how do we work this with what's there? So it's not just that they're trying to, like, everything has to have brick. It shouldn't be. I don't think that's the way they operate. I don't think that's the way we want them to operate, according to what you were saying as well. So I think that it's unfortunate, the name. It really is a design review board, is what, the way I see it.
Part of that statutory, it's got to be called that, but.
Exactly. The state law
but
requires us to call it
Also,
that.
to your point, the best examples that I was talking about, it's contextual. So the downtown context is very different than some of the outlying areas, but they are historic in different ways, perhaps, and they need different considerations. So it's not a one-size-fits-all template that fits over an entire historic district. And there were two different historic districts, I think, for part of the same reason, but you don't have to do that. You can make it contextual without having to have a separate district. So,
I think this request feeds into a bigger conversation that we've talked about having. I don't know when we're going to have it part of the master plan. And I think we heard a little bit in the paper today, the frustration of the process. You know, if you think about, there are licensed engineers, licensed architects designing buildings, and specifically in Portsmouth I'm talking. They submit those projects. They get first reviewed by licensed engineers and the TAC, very, very, credible experts in their individual field of study. And then they come to boards that are traditionally lay people. I mean, we happen to have some experts on the board, but there's traditionally lay people. So there's a tension there, I think, that occurs. Like, man, we've had experts design this, we've had experts review this, and now we have to go through a process of the folks that are traditionally lay people, which is the way the government is set up. I get that. But I think there's tension there that we should probably talk about, that we could help streamline things in general. We talked about the regulations for wetlands and what to do with the buffers there. So I think we have our work ahead of us. I would ask that, the way I would respond to this, we hear you, we want to have a bigger look at the ordinance and other sections to see if we can streamline things, because I don't think this is going to be a magic bullet of all of a sudden reducing costs or reducing time.
agreed. Part of your question, too, it's timing, it's sequencing. You don't go through much detailed design review and then go to a lay board. You try to get your big picture things resolved first and then go to get your technical stuff worked out. If you don't do it that way, and that's actually a strategy some developers will use, what are you doing to me? I've already spent $125,000 on my engineers. I can't make changes now. That's a specious argument. They shouldn't have done it that way.
Which is one of the reasons why we now have pre-conceptual and design review beginning parts, so that we see, this board gets to see them before they spend a year at the HDC trying to get this project all looking the way they want it. At least they have our feedback up front about those projects. So that was, and I was actually on this board as a member when we didn't have pre-conceptual design and design review. Those were concepts that came in after a very large project came through that the entire board was against, and staff had pushed it through, and we were like, yeah, we're not happy with that for a whole host of reasons. So, and they started to realize, well, maybe you guys need to see this early on in the process, because it might be a year later after we see these for early design review before you actually have them come back for site plan. So the things, our whole process has evolved based off of things that happen or go wrong. So I think we're just, when I first joined the board back in 2013, that was when we were first bringing character districts to downtown Portsmouth. That was, I think Tony was actually a city councilor back then. It was a time where there was a lot of upheaval about box buildings being approved in vacant parking lots, and we got rid of the Parade Mall and we put in Port Walk, and there was a lot of people like, we don't like these big square boxes. And so everything happens for a reason, and I just think we've tried to do so many changes to get to a point to make everyone happy that now it's 20,000 pages longer than it needs to be. And we just, one of the things that I have had a goal to do as a city councilor is to continue to try to get rid of some of our districts. Like, why do we have office research? Why do we have mixed residential business when we have gateway and character districts? So slowly but surely just trying to simplify our code as one step is just trying to do that. So I think we need to keep advising our council and our land use boards and through our master plan on how we can simplify the code itself, but still make it so that we get a good project. I'll get off my soapbox now.
My last soapbox. I think we've done an excellent job, and I say we, meaning people before me, in decomplicating the zoning ordinance. I think we have increased the amount of stress on the design process. I think it is harder to get a project approved than it was before, and I think you're seeing that stress. And so, all good intentioned, all well intentioned. I think there's things that we could do as a board that are far beyond the HTC. There's stuff we need to talk in our wetland ordinance processes. I think there's a lot of things we could do to streamline that process. I get that there's a tension there that maybe we don't want to, because there's some anti-development tractions in the town, and people may not want it. But if we want housing for people, we need to make that process smoother.
Well, the good news is what Beth brought up just now, she brought up yesterday during a Zoom call with the master plan group. There was a discussion involving the deputy city attorney, myself, and some staff earlier this week, and you and I have talked about streamlining some of our regulatory things. That's going to happen this year. We're working on all those things to try to make things simpler, more straightforward. I write zoning ordinances. Our zoning ordinance is not simple. It needs to be streamlined, and our process can be streamlined, but so we still get a good product. So we kind of got off track here, but
No, I think we've got a lot of good feedback and that we can put together. I'm hoping between Karen and I and Peter, we can put together a good report back to the city council with the feedback, which was kind of what I thought I would hear, but you got to ask the question, otherwise you don't know what you're going to hear.
right, right.
This is the primary means for preserving the character of Portsmouth for Portsmouth. And I think that, I'm trying to envision, like, what would be built without historic district review? What would a project look like without their review?
You don't know.
Like, how would it be different?
I can bring you some examples.
Go to
if you want to see
Portland.
some photos.
Vinyl siding, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh, no,
You
it
know,
gets,
so-
it gets a lot worse than that.
That's the tip.
Because, and I'm going to pick on some architects.
Uh-oh.
There are some modern architects who would do things that are, they're called iconic structures, where it's all about me, the designer. They don't fit into the neighborhood at all, and they don't want to fit into the neighborhood.
They want to stand out.
The McIntyre building is a semi-example of that. It is meant to stand out as something that, whoa, it just hits you in the face. That's what can happen without an
That
HTC.
it does. Still to this day, it's hit you in the face.
Yeah, so,
I think it's important to maintain the status quo for the Historic District Commission's authority over design review, regardless if it's a parking lot or somebody finds a patch of grass that's been somewhere. There's a small
provide a
inventory
valuable
of
service.
properties that would be affected by this.
So we do have another item,
Yep.
and it's the request for a one-year extension of 635 Sagamore Avenue. This is not a public hearing, but there are issues associated with this application that I am going to invite comment, and I think our deputy city attorney may have some comment, and I don't know if this gentleman is here for this. Would you like to discuss it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Baum with Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. I am here. I'm happy to discuss it. I mean, we think that the request is the situation's less straightforward, but we think the request as a first request is fairly straightforward. So happy to give a brief overview or just answer any questions the board may have.
Well, I have a question related to the life estate. And the way I read Attorney Phoenix's letter, you folks, the collective you, are working on trying to find some other housing arrangement for the holder of the life estate. Is that
That's correct.
correct?
That is correct.
How is that going?
I'm not part of those discussions. I know they're ongoing. I don't know what the current status is. I mean, the current situation, the building itself is not in great shape, so we'd like to have, I think it's in everyone's best interest to have the current occupant into a better situation, but you know, that's something he's working out directly with the property owner or the principal of the property owner. We haven't been involved directly, and I haven't been involved directly with those discussions.
Okay, well, correct me if I'm wrong, the way I understand this, the site plan approval is about to expire, that's why you're requesting an extension.
Tomorrow.
There's a ZBA matter that would expire in May, is that?
That is correct. And that was extended, so we understand the time pressure here.
So we have a deadline of tomorrow, another deadline of May, and you're working on trying to work out something with the holder of the life tenancy. So folks understand what's going on here. The owner of the property sold the property to the developers and reserved a life estate. What that means is that that person has the right to live on the property, and obligations come with that right. Obligation of maintenance, utilities, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I understand it. And I believe the developer is what's called a remainderman, as the holder of the property subject to the life estate. But by virtue of that life estate, nobody can do anything physical to the property, to that building in particular, until that has expired or been deeded away. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't know that there may be things that can be done with the building, but he has a right to remain there, and we're not going to disturb that right. So,
Andrew?
Isn't a life estate a recorded document at the registry?
it is.
It's part of the deed.
It's in the deed.
It is in the, yeah,
Why does this seem all of a sudden then?
It is not. There's been some efforts over time to try to work through the issue. It's taken longer than expected. I think that's why we waited. I mean, it is expiring tomorrow, although we didn't, we filed a few weeks ago. But this, for the same reason that we sought the extension for zoning as well. It's been an ongoing process, and we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I'm not here to nitpick the specifics of this. I understand how it can be very difficult, but at the same time, this was probably part of their purchase due diligence and probably part of all of the documents that they signed at closing, which was several months ago.
Oh, it was longer than that.
Perfect.
I mean, yes.
So I guess I'm just pointing to the fact that why was this not planned and sequenced out with the current owner with a strategy and plan in place?
Well, I think that there was an expectation that the process would go, that it would go a little bit more streamlined than it did. We thought we'd be able to work with the owner. I don't know all the background there to know for sure, but I mean that there was an expectation that he would be able to stay there, potentially as the development occurred. I don't know the details of that, but we can't move forward until he's out. We recognize that. I think I don't have a great answer other than it has taken longer than we anticipated. We are very aware of the timeframes involved, and the owner is doing his best to try to work out a mutually agreeable arrangement with the current owner. We think it's a better situation, but he has to agree as well.
Yeah, it's almost as if.
Until you actually have a document you record releasing that life estate, but you really only need this extension to get you to the other expiration, so to the end of May?
That is correct, although, that would get us the demolition permit and would vest the zoning relief. We're asking for a full year to give us that buffer, in case it's needed. We do have the option of going back to the zoning board and asking for further relief, although I don't think that's our plan, because I don't think we have a lot of optimism that would be granted, but we want to keep that option open because circumstances could change.
What did you mean that it would give you the demolition permit?
My understanding is that we're looking for a demolition permit as the next step. We can't get the demolition permit from the city until the life estate is resolved. That's
Well-
just the next, my understanding is that's the next step in the the regulatory and permitting process.
So if the city permits were all in place, your next step would be a demolition of that building. The city permits are not directly related to demolition, or are they?
It's the first permit.
Yeah, it's the first permit and would be part of, moving forward with the rest.
Yeah, I just having a hard time seeing any harm to the city or its residents by granting an extension to this property. These details, while intriguing, and I'm glad people are concerned about them, I just don't understand why we're having this kind of debate over it.
Does Deputy City Attorney have anything to add to this?
I mean, they're trying to resolve a housing situation. I'm like, why don't we just say, fine, work on it and come back to us in a year?
Well, there's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I would certainly, the specifics of the contractual relationship between Mr. Hines, and his wife, who live in the building, and the current property owners, the LLC. That kind of private relationship is not really the business of the city, for sure. I agree with that. However, the reason that this is in part the city's business is because of what the planning department and myself work on to try and make sure that this board gets what it asks for and what it expects when a project is approved. Post-approval, Vincent Hayes and I, one of the planners, we sit down and we work through plans with other city staff and the property owners to make sure that all conditions are satisfied and that the project will be built in accordance with the plan. Part of that, in accordance with the site plan review regulation, is a site review agreement has to be entered into with a corresponding surety. Those instruments, those are instruments, they serve two purposes. They make sure the city has the funding available in the event the city would have to go and complete any site work on the site, and that the city has the legal ability to go in on the site and complete the work. And in the case of a life estate, if that life estate is not extinguished, then the city wouldn't be able to go in and do that work. Absent that, there wouldn't really be any city involvement in a relationship like this. In terms of your actual question, what relevance is that to you granting a request here? Well, I mean, it's the applicant's obligation to show good cause as to why an extension for up to 1 year may be granted. That's an analysis that you're going to have to undertake. I've been asked to provide more context and information to assist the board so that it knows kind of as much information as it needs to in order to make that decision.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think it's great that it's coming before us, as it should be as part of the rules, and I think it's fine that the applicant explains why there's an issue. We've had a pretty low bar on approving extensions in the past, and financing trouble to curb cuts, approvals and things over the years, and I was just like, it sounds like we have a difficult housing situation. The parties are working towards it. I was late to the meeting. I'm not trying to leave early. I'm just trying to see. I'm like, I just don't understand. I don't understand the harm here in granting this, and so I hadn't heard it. So, anyways, I don't mean to be annoying.
You're not annoying. You're raising an interesting question. From my perspective, where they have the May deadline, I could see, because we're authorized on good cause to give an extension up to a year. So I was thinking up to the meeting after the ZBA expiration. So they'd be going to the ZBA if they needed to, if things weren't resolved before then. Would give them perhaps an incentive to try to work this out, which it seems like it hasn't been worked out for a year. And you can still speak, because I haven't stopped that, so go ahead.
Thank you. I understand the point, Mr. Chair. I guess I would ask that I don't think there's any detriment to a full year extension. It gives us more leeway. We are hyper aware of that May deadline and very motivated by it. I do not, off the top of my head, know all of the potential intricacies of what, might have to be done with the approval, including all of the post-approval conditions, one of which is the, as Attorney McCord has mentioned, is the site plan agreement. We could have all that teed up. I don't know where that is. And so to extend it, I mean, typically that would, if you're suggesting just to extend it through the, the May deadline, that would just give us 1 day after that deadline. I certainly hope we don't go right up to that, but I would ask that we have the additional time available, just if it's needed, to wrap up anything that might be related solely to this board's approval as opposed to the zoning board approval. And offhand, I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but some of those post-condition items like the site plan agreement, all of that always seems to take a little bit more time than people expect. And so we would ask for the full year, or certainly more than just through that ZBA meeting. I don't see any harm to that, and it just gives us a little bit more wiggle room in case there's unanticipated issues.
Yes, Robert, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 other pieces of information in the event that it's helpful. The applicant has worked through their conditions of approval. They've been working on a site plan review agreement and corresponding surety. They've done a lot of that work already. They've been proactive with that. And I can also report that Mr. Hines is, because he came to my office to talk to me, he is represented by counsel at this time, and I don't know what his goals are and what he plans to do in terms of the relationship with the developer, but he does have that representation in case the board wants to consider that.
What I'd say in response to the other attorney's comments is deadlines serve the purpose of incentivizing things to happen. And I wasn't suggesting, and it's just my thought, we haven't had much of a discussion about this, but I was suggesting the next planning board meeting after the ZBA meeting that would perhaps result in a expiration, or just the expiration if you don't need to go back to ZBA. So it wouldn't necessarily be the day after. But by having, we are authorized to go up to a year, and this would give you several months to finish details that seem like they're pretty well along. Whereas if it's extended for a year, then it gets off everybody's desks and you don't pay attention to it until 11 months have gone by, and then you come back and go, wait a minute, we just realized, that's just the nature of how things seem to work in the professional world.
Understood. My recollection is the ZBA does meet just a few days before this board, so we would like, to the extent that we get close to that deadline, and it's possible that we have the wiggle room. I mean, I think this is somewhat unique circumstances, but it's not out of the ordinary to have a 1-year request, and it typically is granted. I think that we are very motivated by that May deadline. As Attorney McCord has noted, we have worked towards it. But I've been part of some of these where even small items that you don't think are going to be an issue, putting forth the surety can take a couple weeks, because sometimes it just gets down to negotiation between city attorney and a bank. And sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's more difficult. And my real concern is those sort of unexpected items that shouldn't be a big deal, but that seem to drag on sometimes. And so I would ask that we have that extra wiggle room and don't believe there's any harm in it.
I think your position is clear. Yes, Andrew?
I agree with you, Tony, but I also don't agree with the use of the term unexpected. This was recorded and aware and disclosed at the time that they bought the property. So I don't disagree with you. I agree that a 1-year extension is probably appropriate. I just don't agree with the use of the term unexpected and how this has been handled, I guess is my point.
Understood. And to clarify, my use of unexpected in this case was related to the final wrap-up items with conditions of approval, usually with surety, with with the site plan agreement. We know what the process is, but for reasons that, for different reasons, it does sometimes extend beyond.
But reasons you knew of.
I'm talking specifically of just coordination with planning staff and with legal staff.
Entirely fair, and I've seen it as well. My trouble is not with the extension or the development at all. It's just, in reality, this could go much longer than a year. This man could live there for several more years. Is that not true?
It is a possibility, which is why we're trying to work something out with them.
Okay. It just seems like we're...
I have a suggested resolution to this, and split the baby. How about we extend this to August of '26? That way, if there's terms of housing transitioning, it's occurring in the summer in better weather, not in February of '27. And so my proposal is we grant an extension to August 20th, 2027. 2026.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion?
I have no issue with the application or the extension. It just seems almost unbelievable that it got to the day before that they needed to do this.
I think it might serve the purpose of hopefully resolving a situation for somebody who maybe need a housing thing resolved sooner than a year from now. So, seems like a reasonable compromise. Any other discussion?
I like the 6 months. It's a good compromise.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy City Attorney. Sorry to make you come out.
Not sure I ever left.
We pretty much discussed the rest of the things on here. I'll just give you a very quick update on Ps. I have reached out to the PDA about having a conversation with them about the statutory framework. It was misunderstood. I will continue. I've asked to be on the March agenda to talk with them, unless the board doesn't want me to. I think there are issues to talk about coordination between the city and them from a land use perspective that relates to the statutory framework. Not specifically housing. Housing is very complicated and deals with the FAA. Senator Kwaka has also reached out to me. She wants to talk about it. I'm happy to talk to her. But I did tell Paul Breen that I would bring this up tonight, and I will plan to go to the March meeting unless this board doesn't want me to.
I'm very much in favor of that.
Same.
I say have fun.
I expect I probably will, but, okay.
Wait, just two quick things.
I don't know.
Well, one is about the March meeting.
We start at 6.
Start at 6.
Do we get
UTL.
pizza?
No. Sorry.
UTL will be here to give an update on the master plan, so that will be from 6 to 7. And the meeting's on March 26th because March 19th is a holiday, so it's really going to be at our second meeting date.
4th.
What?
Eid. It's the eve of Eid.
I heard fourth.
Is that the holiday?
The 4th Thursday. So March.
There's one of those new ones.
Too many numbers for it.
All right.
The regular meeting was going to be March 19th. It's going to be on March 26th.
Is the second date we have reserved.
And we'll start at 6.
I'd have to look it up.
And then Tuesday night, the council passed the zoning amendments that we forwarded on solar, mechanical units, ADUs, and parking.
ADUs.
So they passed third reading as well, so those are now in effect. And on March 16th, they'll have public hearing on the submarine way and the gateway map amendments.
And there was a lot of support at initial discussion for Submarine Way, changing to Gateway 2 and to change the museum. There was a good conversation around that, so.
With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.